Hello, hello, amazing business owners. Welcome back to another episode of Business Straight Up. I have the spoken intro for you coming in just a moment, but I do want to add another little note here because this interview was recorded last year in 2021. I got really overwhelmed with interviews, and part of my issue when it comes to ADHD is when I get overwhelmed, I just shut down and I don't do anything. And I'm really, really working on that this year to keep taking small steps even when I feel overwhelmed. So I am catching up. Kira is such an amazing guest. I can't wait for you to hear this. It was delayed simply because I was overwhelmed and I should have shared it sooner, but here it is now. We're going to talk all about copywriting and embracing your weirdness because people want to hear all about it. Let's listen in. Hello, hello, amazing business owners, creatives, photographers, entrepreneurs. Welcome to another episode of Business Straight Up, the podcast for creative business owners who want to actually make a living doing what they love. Today's episode is amazing. I know I always say that, but what can I say? I have awesome guests. Today, I am so excited to welcome Kira Hug. She is basically a badass copywriter, copywriting queen. She has worked for so many big names. Chances are you have actually seen her work and you don't even know it. She is a personality-driven conversion copywriter, co-founder of the Copywriter Club, and co-host of the Copywriter Club Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about so many different things, partially branding. We're going to talk about what makes you weird and why the heck you should share that, how to really step into your expertise, and what to do when you're scared. Spoiler alert. Do it anyway. So I can't wait for you to hear today's episode. As always, if you love this episode, can you head on over to iTunes and leave a review? Those reviews mean so much. I know they're so silly and they don't mean a lot to you guys, but when it comes to podcasters, they really do mean a lot to us and we so appreciate them. So head on over to iTunes, leave a review. You can even pause right now. Ready? Welcome back. Did you leave the review? Let's dive into today's episode with Kira Hug and talk all about branding and weirdness and copywriting and all of the things that will help your business grow so much. Hey there, awesome people. I am Brooke Summer and you are listening to Business Straight Up, the podcast for creative entrepreneurs to learn, connect, grow, and build the business and life that they dream of. Welcome, let's get going and dive right in. Hello, amazing business owners. Welcome back to another episode of Business Straight Up, the podcast for creative business owners who want to actually make a living doing what they love, living the dream, right? I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me. We have a very special treat today. This woman is such a badass when it comes to copywriting, and she's probably done a lot of work that you've seen, even if you don't know it. Kira Hug is a personality-driven conversion copywriter, co-founder of the Copywriter Club and co-host of the Copywriter Club Podcast. Welcome, Kira. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brooke. Yeah, it's great to be here.
I have so many questions for you because I know that copywriting is so important. I know you're the copywriting queen, and I know that you have a framework and a ton of suggestions for how to help someone really rock the copy on their website, email, social, and all over their businesses. But I know that we will share the opinion that branding and really knowing your brand in and out is a foundation for any business, because ultimately that will affect someone's copy and everything that they do. So we're going to totally talk about that, but I completely forgot to ask you a little bit more about yourself. I forgot to put it in my notes. See, that's what happens with video. I get distracted. Tell me a little bit more about your journey and where you're from and what has led you to where you are today.
Yeah. So I was the art kid growing up, and my older sister was like the smart one getting scholarships. My older brother was like the computer guy. My younger brother was like the funny one that everyone liked. And I was the creative one. And so I really owned that role and went to art school. and pursued that path, even though I might luckily was encouraged the entire way. But I never really knew what that would turn into because, as an artist, everyone's like, well, what are you going to do with that? And so I pursued it and went the graphic design route and loved that path and actually fell in love with advertising and marketing in school, but I didn't really know, it didn't really hit me like this could be something I pursue.
Yes.
And then I pursued my real dream, which was to move to New York City. So that was the thing I wanted more than anything. And so that was the big jump after school to go to New York City. But
why are artists drawn to New York?
I know.
I love New York too.
Yeah, I think it's because there's so many interesting people there, and it's such a great place to get lost. And especially I'm an introvert, so it's a great place to go if you're an introvert because you can just, well, in some ways it's the worst place you can go because it's loud, and if you're sensitive, it's the worst place. But you can just kind of get lost and just observe people and watch human nature take place.
Yes.
But so that was the big goal, but I hadn't really planned how I would do it and get there. So I ended up taking my first job was at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, picking people up. Not an art job, not this vision I had as an artist and designer working in New York City. It was I was washing cars. But it was a really great foundation to learn about sales and to learn about marketing. And from there, I started to pivot and move into a design role at Estee Lauder, and then moved into more nonprofit work and really honing in on marketing. It seemed like marketing was the thread that kept moving me forward. It was marketing at startups and nonprofits, and eventually fell into copywriting when someone hired me to write their website copy. And I did it and I was getting paid, and then someone else hired me. And I was trying to figure out a side business and what it would be. And finally my friend was like, I just hired you. I paid you money to write website copy. You're a copywriter. Why are you pursuing all these other hobbies when this is what people are paying you to do? Yeah. And that was the light bulb moment for me. Oh, people are willing to pay me for this. I can really own this and pursue this path. And once it hit me, I was all in on copywriting and then just didn't look back from that point.
Isn't it funny how our past lives kind of form where we're at currently, the marketing stuff? And I know I have expertise in IT and travel and marketing, and it kind of all forms together to be exactly what I do today. It's it was set up perfectly.
No, totally. And even though I hated that first job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car when I was in it, shocking. But when I look back, I was that was probably a really pivotal role for me to learn sales, because as a copywriter, you have to understand sales. That's a huge part of the job in order to do it well and get results. And so without that, maybe I would be missing a piece that I would have to brush up on now.
So for anyone that doesn't understand and they're like, what the hell is copywriter? I copyright my photos. What's the difference between just writing on your website and actually having copy for your website?
Yeah, so copywriting is really kind of the art and science behind writing, where you're writing with persuasion. You're using persuasion to change someone's behavior, to encourage them to take action. Oftentimes copywriting is driven to sales, and it's driven to some type of action, which could be buying something or jumping on your list or signing up for a webinar. And so there's more of a scientific approach to it if you're writing more conversion-based copy.
Yes. And those conversions are what we all need to run a business, right? So
you need conversions.
Right. Exactly. We need leads and sales. And in order to get those, we have to have those conversions. So that copy is important, not just on a website, but in emails and social and all of this. It's so important. And it's something that so many business owners kind of just gloss over. They're like, I don't need to write much on my website.
Yeah. And I think business owners are starting to realize the importance of it, just because I know I also run the Copywriter Club with my business partner. And so the copywriting space has just taken off. There are more and more copywriters every day who are realizing this is a legit business. I can do really well in this space, because especially now with the year we've had in 2020 with COVID, so many businesses have moved into e-commerce and moved fully online and realized I can't just have a pretty flowery website that sounds good. I need it to serve a purpose because I can no longer sell in person. So I think it's definitely changed over the last 5 to 10 years. And people realize the importance of it.
Yes, I love that. I think that especially for creatives, we want to show photos of our art on our
Yes.
website. And while that is important, from an SEO perspective, we also need to have the text. And the text is something that can not only sell us and convert visitors into clients, but it's something that's important for search engines as well.
Yeah, and it helps you differentiate yourself from every competitor you have. Beyond, yes, your photos can differentiate yourself, but beyond that, how can you, as a service provider, especially if you are the face of your business, and especially if you're doing intimate work, such as photography,
Yes.
you really have to build that trust and that intimacy before someone hires you and spends a lot of money with you and brings you into their home or their world or their wedding. That trust is really important.
Absolutely. And especially if you're going to have a higher price point,
Right.
we have to have that know, like,
Right.
trust factor, because anyone can go to, gosh, I don't even know if Penny's is doing photos anymore, but anyone can go to one of those portrait things where it's like $20 for a photo session. But if you want to have a higher price point, and I work with estheticians and wedding professionals and all of these creatives that want to charge a higher price, and they don't understand that you have to lead someone through a path in order to book them. And that involves so much copy and talking to them so that they know who you are.
Yeah, especially if that's one of their questions, like, why is this person more or double the
Yes.
price as these other three people? And so you
Yes.
have to be able to close the loop and answer that question that they're thinking, especially if you aren't necessarily getting on a sales call yet. They're just reading your website copy. You need to address those objections and those hesitations, which is really like a huge part of copywriting, is just addressing all the stuff that's going on in your readers, your buyers, your prospects' mind,
Yes.
so that so you can get on a sales call, or so that you can sell something without even getting on a sales call.
Yes. We all have that little voice in our brains that's telling us something, right?
Constantly, we cannot turn that voice off, even if we want to. And
Mhm.
so, if we want to work with our prospect, we got to address all their questions and know what they
Yes.
are. And that means you also have to do heavy research and understand
Yes.
your audience and what they're looking for.
Absolutely. That ideal client, right?
Yes, know your ideal client.
So when it comes to branding, I know that I went a little bit into it and then I backtracked a little bit,
Yeah.
but what are some of your top branding tips when it comes to defining a brand that will then influence all of the business decisions that we make every day?
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about branding, before we even start to write the copy, I'm thinking of what makes you weird as a business owner. And I've kind of divided that into the weird trifecta. And so in that sense, I'm looking at my clients and kind of dissecting these three parts of their brand. And the first one is personality. So with the personality, I'm really looking at, what does their voice sound like when they're speaking, and how can I translate that to copy? What is their vibe overall? How are they showing up? What's the feel? What are the visual elements too? And visuals are such a huge part of copywriting and layout and design. And so pulling all of those into the personality is key. I'm also looking at values, and values really is about the message that they're sharing. So developing their core message and the meaning behind it. What are they all about? What do they care about? And we know now more than ever, people need to align with your values before they want to purchase from you. And then the last part of the weird trifecta is your advantage in the marketplace. So I really need to focus on that piece of it. How are you different? What is your, for your unique mechanism, to use just marketing language, like what makes you different? How are you doing things differently? What is the genius that you bring to the table? Everybody has it. So really dissecting and figuring out what this business owner is doing or their company is doing. It could be their process. It could be the way that they work. It could just be the culture that they've created. So those are the three core pieces. And if I can figure out those, then I'm in good shape with the brand, and then can start to move forward with the copy because I understand the brand personality.
And it's important to note that so many people think that what they create is their brand, and it's not that at all. Can you talk about like how those are kind of separate pieces?
As far as like the visual elements versus the actual.
That's just one piece of it.
Yes. So yeah, you can hire and work with like creative directors, right? I think of creative directors on the branding side, creating the visual elements, creating the imagery, the logos, your typography, figuring out how you're going to show up visually to create that vibe. But behind that and underneath that is all the core foundational parts of what you're actually about and what you stand for. And even again, if you're a personal brand and a service provider, it's like, how do you show up as a human? What are your vulnerabilities? What are your vices? And so I think it's really removing the polish, which was popular, 10 years ago. It was like showing up polished, looking prim and proper, trying to fit a certain image of what we thought an online business owner should look like. And now it's really more about, well, who are you actually? We want to know the good, the bad, the ugly. And bring all of that to the forefront so we can know you as a multifaceted brand, just like you're a multifaceted person. And so in some ways it's easier to brand. I think it's easier to brand someone if they're the service provider, because it's like, it's that person. It gets a little trickier as you, as companies increase in size. And now it's not about the one person anymore. It's about the company. It's about the team. But you can do it either way.
Absolutely. I know that in the past year, like 2020, we've all been talking about the lessons from 2020, right? But one of mine was not being the polished person, because I'm very, very good at that in one of my brands. In the other brand, it's very hard for me because I don't want someone to think that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I feel like I have this idea that if I let my weirdness out or if I let myself out, that someone will assume that I don't know what I'm doing. And so that has been really difficult for me on one side of my business. Now on the photography side, I got that down. We are so good at that. But the other one, I'm like, I don't know. And I know that so many people have this, like, they want to hide their weird, right? Like, I really like to have the volume on my car stereo on an even number.
That is amazing and weird. Yes, I love it.
I have no reason for it. There is no logic, but it's so funny sharing little things like that. Other people are like, "Girl, me too." So how do we get past that fear, that habit?
Well, I guess I would want to know, because I'm curious, like with your two brands, how come one is easier than the other? Do you feel like you're showing up fully in one, but not the other?
Yes.
And why is it easier in one, not the other? Are you more established in it, or is it just, okay.
Very much so. Yeah. Okay. One, I've been in business for 15 years and one is 17 years. And oh my gosh, I can't do math today. 15 years. I'm sorry. And the other is about 5 years. So there is a big difference and I'm just not as established. And so for me personally, in my photography brand, I am completely on brand. Like I know my brand in and out, but on my teaching side is where I have spent the last year kind of learning those lessons the hard way of scared to show up and scared to do something. And, and I feel like so many of us try and hide that about ourselves. We hide the things that are different and that ultimately make us who we are. And we tend to ignore the fact that that's a lot of times why people hire us.
Yeah, well, I think you could do it if you feel kind of nervous or uneasy about sharing the weirdness. I would just kind of treat it like an experiment, and I wouldn't do all of it at once. So it might just be like you send a weekly email to your list. Great. So in this week, what can you share? Like, what is one thing that you could share in there that's just like feels a little uncomfortable or feels like, oh, that's very personal, or like that's weird, no one's going to relate to that, or it just makes you happy because you actually want to share it. You actually really want to share more of who you are. It doesn't have to be like 5 different things. It doesn't have to be overdone where you tell this elaborate story about this one time, you did this one crazy thing. It could just be one detail, like the detail that you shared about the volume needs to be an even number. Like I would just like tease that out and start with that as the intro of an email, and then figure out how
it's
you
going to be out there now.
figure out how you can transition into like whatever you're talking about in that weekly email. But that's something that makes you really, it's charming, right? It's like, I can't relate to that, but I love that. I love that about you. And I will always remember that about you. And I also saw on your Instagram feed that you love to eat the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, like the ones that come in wrappers.
The frozen ones.
Frozen peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I saw that on your Insta feed and I was like, that's so weird. I love it. Like, I will always remember that. And I also love those too.
That's funny.
But that's what I looked at your whole feed, and that's what stood out the most, like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Isn't that funny? And what's funny is I don't eat them at home, but when I'm traveling, that's like life, because they make your life so much easier because you don't have to go find food if you're hungry, and then you're not getting hangry instead. So
that's what made it even more interesting. It wasn't like, well, this is my favorite food, I eat it all the time. It was like, no, I just eat this when I travel and I make sure I find them. And I was like, that's a lot of effort. So this is like really interesting.
I have grocery delivery of those, like a few things, grocery delivery for that reason.
Yeah. So it's like more of those little details. So I think especially with branding and especially with copywriting, the more scary specific you can get with details about whatever you're selling or about your own life and about your students and your clients, the more we kind of crave specifics. Like, we don't want to have vague comments about whatever. We want to know those details about volume being an even number, or peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Right. And isn't that funny that that's what stood out to you on my Instagram? Because I put other stuff about what I do all the time on Instagram, but that's the dorkiest photo. For anyone that has not seen the picture, I literally have a sandwich in my mouth and I have like huge eyes because I'm looking ridiculous. And I also always wear sequin t-shirts when I go to conferences and stuff. So I have a sequin shirt on and I have my
I didn't even notice the sequins. I just noticed the peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I always wear my sequin shirts when I'm at conferences because it helps people remember me and remember like conversation. They're like, oh, you had the lips on yesterday. I'm like, yes, I did. But it's so funny that that's what stood out, because it's one photo in like probably 30 photos in the last month.
I looked at a lot of your photos. Yeah, I looked at all your posts, and that was when I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I hope she talks about that all the time in her copywriting.
Do not.
I think it's similar to going to a conference and you wearing sequins at a conference so people remember you. It's something that's a little bit different. It's something that you can't miss. It grabs attention. It's kind of the same thing with copywriting. It's like, what can you drop into your copy that people can't help but remember? Like, it's there and they will not forget it. Drop a little bit of that here and there to hold attention, grab attention, and be remembered.
It's funny. In my photography brand, I love glitter. Glitter is my favorite color. I have zero shame about it. People hate glitter and I'm okay with that. I absolutely love it.
I don't understand how anyone could hate glitter. I mean, I get like maybe not everyone loves it as much, but how could you hate something so beautiful?
Right. And so now I will have women that I have never worked with. I don't know these women at all. They've never been a client, but they will tag me on social media posts of glitter products because they know that I love glitter, which means I am in their brain somewhere because of that fact, which is so funny to me, because we all want to be known for what we do, right? Like, I want to be known because I create amazing photos for my clients, but the reality is I am the differentiating factor in that business. It's not my pictures.
Yes.
And that's kind of hard for artists to swallow sometimes.
Yeah, we really care about the artist behind the pictures or behind whatever service it is. It's like we care about that person more than ever. And I think that's why this is why we're on social media, on Instagram. Like, we are really interested in other people as humans. And so the more you can share, the more connections you create. So it's like, you just think about all the lines of connection you can create by sharing more and more about yourself. And maybe one won't resonate. Like, maybe the peanut butter and jelly would not resonate with everyone. They might just like gloss over it, and that's fine, but it got me. And so the glitter and the sequence might get somebody else, and talking about the radio being on an even number will get somebody else. So you're almost doing yourself and your brand and your business a disservice by not dropping those lines of connection as much as you can, because
Definitely.
that's just a way to grow the audience.
Well, and so many of us think that we have kind of a boring life. Like we see some people talk about their backstories and they're like, I trudged through Haiti uphill both ways. And we're like, we don't have that backstory. So we think that our lives are boring and therefore not as interesting or worthy of sharing. And what I hear you saying is that is not the truth. And we should embrace those silly little things that we see every day.
Yes, it is, because I feel the same way. I mean, especially right now, like nobody's going out and like leading an exciting life right now. I mean, maybe eventually once we leave our
Isn't
homes,
that the truth?
right?
Yes.
So we're all kind of boring, but we're not. Like, what are you doing behind closed doors? What are you what are you doing? What are you doing in your home? It is very interesting, especially we have that voyeuristic tendency. Like, I want to know what people are doing. And so I think, test it out. Like the best way for conversion copy to see if it works is to test, right? If it works because if you sold something, if people opened an email. So I would just start to see what's resonating, like drop in details and weird factoids and see what resonates, because people will respond and you'll get some feedback. It may not be as clear as reading Google Analytics, but you'll get feedback from it. And you'll start to see, well, okay, no one really responded to that, but they really did respond to this one email. Like, why did they respond to that? Well, here's what I talked about. And I shared something really uncomfortable or weird or not typical, and they responded to that. So start to note, and that builds your confidence, right? So then you kind of feel like, I can do this again.
Absolutely. So being hired for expertise means we have to be an expert in something. For someone that feels completely unknown right now, sharing the little details, all of that stuff, but how can they start to build authority in their expertise, like in their chosen industry and their niche, to stand out even more and be seen as that expert who is relatable and lovable because of all these weird little things too?
Yeah, I love that question. So I help a lot of copywriters with building their authority. And so what I've noticed is that we all typically wait way too long to feel like we're ready to start building your authority. So as soon as you decide,
there's some certificate or something.
Right. Or exactly. Or like you have to be doing it for 5 years or whatever. We all have a different marker in our mind.
Yes.
But we're telling ourselves, well, I'm a newbie. I can't build my authority yet. And so I would just challenge that. I think as soon as this is what I'm committed to, at least for the next 6 months, like I'm committed to building this business. We'll check in 6 months and see where we are. Then once you're committed to that, like become a teacher immediately. I'm not saying to fake anything. I'm not saying to trick anyone into believing you're an expert, but if you're practicing and actively, even if you're not getting paid, but you're still creating, you're still writing, you're still doing your craft, teach as you do it. Like do it and then teach it. And a simple way to do that is, as a podcast host, like start with podcasting. You can pitch podcasts. There are so many podcasts out there. The market's continuing to grow. And if you want to be an expert, the best way to do it is to pitch podcasts. You can pitch ones that are smaller and probably more eager to say yes, and go on there and start teaching. Give them 3 topics you could talk about and teach. And you don't have to be doing it for 3 years. I did that when I just became a copywriter. I pitched 30 podcasts in 30 days. I was like unknown. I had like a pirate costume on my website. I didn't have a professional website. And I just was like, you know what? I have stuff to share. I have stuff to teach. And even beyond my time as like a so-called copywriter, which I'd just become, I still had professional experience. So even if you just jumped into your craft recently as a business owner, you have years in your career in even doing different things that you could teach and talk about, and you have life experience you can teach and talk about. And of course you want to weave that into like, oh, by the way, here's my business, here's how you can work with me. But you don't have to just go on podcasts and talk about the craft. You can talk about all these other things that you're excited about or passionate about or you have experience in.
Yes. And so many things weave into other things. So for instance, I am a boudoir photographer on one side, but I am often asked to speak on empowering women in general, not boudoir photography. So the two go hand in hand. But when someone wants me at an event, it's usually because of women embracing their worth, knowing their value, things like that, which kind of is the foundation of what I do. And I've found that it's the foundation in both of my businesses, which is kind of ironic, but we have that expertise. We have that drive in us for a reason. And so many of us ignore that because we think that we're not good enough at it yet. And the reality is, when is good enough ever enough? What's the line?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think as long as you can teach something or share something that's valuable, which we can all do that, then you are ready to move forward. And yes,
Definitely.
you will always continue to learn and have more to share, but start with where you are. And if you don't, just know that there are other people who will do that and who are starting out just like you, and who will say, I'm going to start teaching, I'm going to start sharing. And they have just as much experience or less experience. So that's when I start to get angry, and I'm like, well, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. So, so if that motivates you, great.
I think that embracing our authority and understanding that even if you can touch one life, that's pretty significant, even if it's just one.
Yes.
And so many of us want these huge followings and this big Facebook group or this big, Instagram followers. I'm Instagram challenged, but so many of us want to grow all of these numbers, and I'm a huge data and numbers person. But at the same time, if you're not showing up for the smaller audience that you have now, why would you ever have more?
Yeah, definitely starting small and just focusing on that core group who needs you and who's asking you for help. And sometimes it just starts with your first few clients, and that's okay, right? It doesn't start with this massive community. It's like, can you solve a problem for one client? And if you don't have a portfolio and you can't get paid yet, or like maybe you have to start low, that's okay. But like, solve a problem, give them a result, and then it'll get easier. And then you can go help someone else and solve a different problem. And then it's just, you start to stack it. And then I think once you see yourself as less of like a service provider and more of a problem solver, it just becomes easier, because you're like, I can solve problems. I'm going to solve more problems. And then I'm going to start to like talk about it and teach. And then I'm going to solve more problems and scale it and work with a group of people. And so, but it starts with the confidence to know that you can solve a problem for a single person, like you said.
Yes. And business is a long game. So many people are in it and they're like, I'm going to be an overnight success, overnight sensation. And the reality is it just doesn't work that way. This is a long game.
Yeah. And I love following Rachel Rogers and her success as a business coach, and how she's evolved her business and is making multi-million dollars now in her business, because she's been at it for a while. Like, she's been in her business for at least 10 years, more. And it just shows like it takes time. And so I think that if you're willing to commit the time and see where your business evolves, then it's going to pay off, because other people will jump out, because it's not easy. And so people who can't handle it will leave and try something else, and you just have to stick with it.
Absolutely. I know that you have worked with some really big names like Jasmine Star and Rick Mulready and James Wedmore. How did you land those clients? What is the secret behind getting your foot in the door with these larger clients or partnerships?
Well, I think it goes back to what we've been talking about. So starting with the brand and the importance of creating a brand. So I don't know for certain, but when James Wedmore found me couple of years ago, I think he reached out because of the brand I created. And if you check out my website, it's like, it's a weird brand, and it has different characters, and it's all about embracing what makes you weird, which is what we've been talking about on this podcast. And so from what it sounded like, that message resonated with him, where he's like, I'm weird. Like, James Wedmore is totally weird. And so that resonated with him, and he reached out. So, but I really believe if I had a different brand that maybe wasn't truly who I was, or like didn't speak to him in that same way, he probably would have looked for someone else, right? And hired someone else for that particular project. So I do believe in like the strength of your brand and how important that is. Don't overlook that. And when you can invest in it or DIY it, it's worth it. But then the second part of it speaks to building your authority, because then after I worked with James, he invited me to teach in his communities, and that was so generous of him. And so once I did that, I went to one of his first mastermind retreats, and spoke. And I don't think I was a great speaker at all, but I just vomited everything I knew about copywriting into this room. And Jasmine Star was in the room.
It must have worked.
It worked because I was critiquing Jasmine's copy at the time. She said I could. And so I hadn't met her, but she submitted her copy. And so I was critiquing it to the group. And so I met her, but it was from teaching. I did not feel prepared to teach. I was still like figuring stuff out. But when you get the invite, when you get the opportunity, you just do it, because I had stuff to share. You know, I probably could always improve presentations, but you still have the knowledge to share and something teaching. And I did at that time. And so putting yourself in front of a group of ideal clients, you know, amazing people like Jasmine Star, will pay off when you can say yes to those opportunities, when you can do it before you feel ready. And again, when you create the brand that even attracts someone who is of that caliber, right? And so would I have attracted someone like James Wedmore a couple years before when I didn't have the brand developed? Probably not. So it's a combination: branding, saying yes to opportunities before you feel ready, and putting yourself in a role where you can show up as the authority in the room on some subject.
Yes. To feel the fear and do it anyway, right?
Yes.
I feel like I need that on a bracelet now too.
I know.
Thank you so much for being here today, Kira. Your expertise is so valuable, and I really appreciate your time. For anyone that's listening that wants to learn more, where can they find out more about what you offer and connect with you?
Yeah, well, if you want to learn more about copywriting, you can visit the copywriterclub.com. You don't need to be a copywriter to check out the site, listen to the podcast. And if you want to check out my site, you can find me at kirahug.com. That's where I have my own copywriting services.
Is the Copywriter Club a membership, or like, do you teach more about copywriting, or? It's for
copywriters, and we are training next generation of copywriters to build profitable businesses and to figure out their niche and their brand. And so it's a paid membership. It's a free group. It's 11,000 people in the free group, and it's a podcast. It's masterminds. It's like the full extension model of copywriting.
I'm a BBD girl. I get you.
Yeah.
I am.
It's the BBD model of copywriting.
That's awesome. For anyone who does not know what the ascension model is, it means a way to work up as far as volume. So the bottom will have more people, and then as you get up, so for instance, you might have like a group of a group of clients that you want to work with, and you do like a marathon day, but then you want to work one-on-one with someone. And so it goes up the ladder because now it's one-on-one, it's more specific, and there's a higher price attached to that as well. So
yeah, it's great for giving your clients a path, right? So they always know, well, here's the next level where I can work with you. And so you show them how they can continue so they don't leave, right? So they don't jump onto someone else's extension ladder.
Absolutely. It's so smart. It's crazy smart.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you were with us today. To all of the listeners and awesome business owners that have joined us, thank you for being here today as well. I'm truly honored that you pressed play and spent this time with Kira and I. If you are someone who wants to help other people, and you know someone who can use this information, maybe they're struggling with their brand, or they just don't feel like they're ready to step into their authority, forward this episode onto them. I know that Kira and I would definitely appreciate it. If you are thinking, wow, this episode is amazing, Brooke, how can I thank you? I have a way you can thank me. Can you head on over to iTunes and leave a review? I know it seems small, it takes a few minutes, but those reviews help me know exactly how I can better serve you, what you want to learn, what you need from me, and it helps me get amazing guests like Kira. So hit pause now, leave a review. If you screenshot your review before hitting submit and email it to hello@businessstraightup.com, I will send you a free gift. And I never say what it is because it changes all the time.
I want the free gift.
I know, it's freebies, it's fun stuff. So it's like templates and stuff like that. Please, please, please leave those reviews so that we can continue kicking ass with great content every week. Kira, do you have any parting words for all of the business owners, creatives listening that might feel stuck or maybe afraid, or any of the things that we've talked about today?
I want you, Brooke, to write about all your weirdness. And I want to see stories in your copy
homework's
about.
not for me.
I'm watching you. I want to see stories about peanut butter and the music being at an even number. And for everyone listening, just figure out, one story that feels a little bit weird. If you don't know, you can always ask your friends, your siblings, partners, parents. Like, they know what makes you weird. They will have a list, so you can ask them. Thank you for having me, Brooke.
I think that could be dangerous with a partner.
Yeah, I know.
I could ask my husband, what makes me weird? And he would have a list, I'm sure.
It's content, great content.
That's true. Oh, that's scary though. For everyone listening today, I'm not letting you off the hook without some homework. And Kira gave me some homework too. So I want to know, what makes you weird? What makes you different? What makes you stand out? And don't just tell me that you're good at what you do, because that's not enough to stand out. All professionals should be good at what they do. So let me know in the community at businessstraightup.com/community. Keep moving forward, learning, and taking action on all of your biggest goals. I can't wait to see what you do with your business and how you impact the world. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you, Kira.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Business Straight Up. I'm so glad that you could join us today. Check out the show notes for this and all of the episodes at businessstraightuppodcast.com. And I can't wait to talk with you again. Have a great day.